Mrs. Kale had worked at Valeth House for 20 years, and in that time she had learned two things about Domenico Sar. He did not raise his voice, and he did not need to. The stillness he carried into a room was enough. Drivers straightened. Cooks went quiet. Accountants who had come to deliver bad news left the study looking smaller than when they had entered. He was not a cruel man, Mrs. Kale had watched enough cruel men to know the difference, but he was a man whose world arranged itself around him without being asked, and who had long since stopped noticing that it did. His daughter had stopped speaking 2 years ago, the week after her mother's funeral. Lena was 7 now, small for her age, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's habit of standing very still when she was frightened. She had not spoken a word since the burial. Not to speech therapist, not to the two nurses who had come before, not to Aldana, who was Mr. Sarah's cousin by marriage and had installed herself at Valeth House in the months after the loss, managing the child's schedule and the child's care accounts with the brisk efficiency of someone who had decided the position suited her. The first nurse had quit in a month. The second had lasted 3 weeks. When the agency sent a third, Mrs. Kale had looked the woman over in the kitchen doorway, her plain coat, her worn bag, her calm, unremarkable face, and thought, she won't last the fortnight. Her name was Vera. She was neither young nor old, neither impressive nor distressing. She asked where Lena took her afternoon tea, thanked Mrs. Kale without ceremony, and went upstairs. What she did up there in the first week was quiet. She read to Lena, not performance, no exaggerated voices, just a steady voice going forward. She left the curtains as Lena left them. She did not try to make the child smile, and Mrs. Kale suspected that was why Lena, by the 5th day, had taken to sitting near her rather than in the far corner by the window. Aldana said at dinner that the new nurse seemed sweet but ineffective, Mr. Sar at the head of the table said nothing. He rarely spoke of Lena at meals. Mrs. Kale had learned not to read his silences because she was never right about what was in them. The fever came on a Wednesday night, between 1 and 2 in the morning. Mrs. Kale heard Vera's quick step on the upstairs corridor and was at the nursery door in 4 minutes. Lena was burning, her small face flushed and damp, her breathing fast and shallow. Vera had already stripped the heaviest blanket, was pressing a cool cloth to the child's forehead with one hand and checking the time with the other, her face composed in the particular way of someone who has decided there is no room for alarm in the next several hours. She told Mrs. Kale which physician to call and the name of the medication in the lower cabinet. She said both things once, clearly, without repetition. Mrs. Kale, who had given orders in this house for 2 decades, found herself going to the telephone without a word. The physician came and went by 3. He said the fever was high but not dangerous if managed, left instructions, and told Vera she was doing exactly right. Kale watched from the doorway as Vera thanked him, closed the door quietly so as not to wake Lena, and then sat back down in the chair at the bedside without any particular show of relief. She had a small cup of water. She set it on the table and picked up the book she had been reading to Lena that week, opened to the same page, and simply waited. She stayed the whole night. Mrs. Kale went back to her room at 4, then found herself returning at 5:30, then again at 6:30. Each time she passed the nursery, the light under the door was steady. At 7, when the house began to stir, she came to the corridor and stood still a moment before pushing the door open a crack. Lena was sleeping. Her color had softened, her breathing slow and even. Vera sat in the chair with the book closed in her lap, awake, watching the child the way Mrs. Kale had seen new mothers watch, not anxiously, just present, completely present. It was while gathering Lena's medical file for the physician's morning callback, the folder kept in the lower drawer of the nursery cabinet, that Vera found the receipts. Mrs. Kale was not in the room when it happened, but she came back to find Vera standing at the cabinet with a thin sheaf of papers in her hand, her expression neither alarmed nor calculating. She was reading the way a careful person reads something that doesn't quite add up. A second time, then a third. The care account receipts were itemized, dated, signed. Several of the specialists listed had not, to Mrs. Kale's knowledge, ever set foot at Valeth House. 3 of the dates corresponded to weeks when Lena had been at her grandparents' in the country, and Mrs. Kale happened to know this because she had packed the child's trunk herself. Vera looked at her. She didn't speak. She set the medical folder aside, paper-clipped the receipts, and went to the study. She left the papers on the desk. She did not wait. She went back upstairs to Lena, Mr. Sar came down at 8 and found them there. What happened in the study that morning, Mrs. Kale was not present for. She heard no raised voices, because there never were any. She saw Aldana leave Valeth House at 9:30 with one bag, walking quickly to the car that had been arranged for her, and she did not come back. Mr. Sar's assistant made 2 phone calls in the course of the morning. The care accounts were reviewed by a different firm by the following week. None of it was loud. None of it was visible from the outside. That was how this house worked, and Mrs. Kale understood it. What she had not expected was what happened in the nursery at 10:30. She was in the corridor when she heard it, and she stopped walking. Lena's voice, small, rough with disuse, but unmistakable. Mrs. Kale pressed herself flat against the wall beside the cracked nursery door, the way she had not done since she was a girl listening for something she wasn't supposed to hear. Inside Vera had Lena propped against the pillows, the book open between them. Lena had spoken, one word, her own name, in answer to something Vera had asked softly about the story's main character. Mrs. Kale could not see Vera's face from the angle, but she saw her hand. It had stopped on the page, perfectly still, and then after a moment moved on, turning to the next illustration as though nothing remarkable had occurred. She did not make a sound. She did not call out. She simply continued. She was still reading when Mr. Sarah appeared at the far end of the corridor. He had come upstairs quietly. Mrs. Kale had not heard him on the stairs. He stood the end of the hall, and she knew, from the way he had gone very still, that he had heard it too. He stood there for a long moment in the dim corridor light, one hand at his side, the other against the wall. His face, which Mrs. Kale had watched compose itself against bad news in this house for 20 years, was doing something else. She could not name it exactly. It was the expression of a man hearing something he had stopped expecting to hear. He moved to the nursery door. He did not push it open. He stood at the threshold, and through the gap, Mrs. Kale could see him watching Vera read to his daughter, watching the child's eyes tracking the pages, watching Vera's unhurried voice go forward, watching Lena's hand reach out at the turn of a page and touch the illustration of a small house in a field of winter grass. After a while, he pushed the door open gently and stepped in. Lena looked up. He crossed to the bed and sat on the edge of it, and the child moved over a small amount to make room for him, in the way children do with people they are comfortable with. Without thinking about it, Vera closed the book, glanced at him once. Level, neither afraid nor deferential, and began to rise. He said, "You don't have to go." It was not a question. She sat back down. The three of them stayed like that for a while in the quiet nursery. The child between them, the morning light coming through the curtains, Lena preferred left half open. Mrs. Kale stood in the corridor until she felt she was intruding on something that did not belong to her, and then she walked back toward the stairs. She heard him speak again before she reached them. Low, unhurried, the tone he used when he had settled something in himself. "The agency contract ends next Friday," he said. There was a small silence. Then Vera's voice, calm and plain. "I know. I'd like to discuss something different," he said, "if you're willing." Mrs. Kale went down the stairs and did not hear the rest. She thought about it for a long time afterward, through the rest of that day, and the days that followed, as Lena began to speak in small installments, a word here and a sentence there, and as Vera's presence at Valath House became something the house simply organized itself around, quietly, the way it organized itself around everything that Mr. Sarr had decided to keep. She thought about the way she had looked at Vera in the kitchen doorway on the first day, the plain coat, the worn bag, the unremarkable face, and made her judgment in under a minute. She had been wrong. She knew that now. The thing that had changed this house was not anything loud or dramatic. It was a woman who stayed through the night when she didn't have to, who placed a sheaf of papers on a desk without explanation and went back upstairs, who read a sentence aloud and waited without expectation for a child to speak, and who, when the child finally did, turned the page and kept going as though she had always believed it would come. 20 years, and Mrs. Kale had never seen Domenico Sarra sit on the edge of his daughter's bed and simply stay. She had never heard Lena lean her head against someone's arm the way she had by mid-morning. Her eyes closed, her breathing soft. She had not expected Vera. None of them had. That, Mrs. Kale thought, was the whole story, and probably the most important thing she had learned in all her years at Valath House. The one who changes everything is rarely the one you saw coming.